I never intended to become the caretaker of a 19th century ruin. I was 32 and burnt out from a tech job in Atlanta when my uncle called from St. Augustine, Florida. He'd inherited a crumbling boarding house on St. George Street, built in 1889. The same year, the St. Augustine Lighthouse was electrified, and Henry Flagler was transforming the town into a resort. My uncle had no use for a dilapidated mansion with peeling paint and warped floors. "Take it off my hands," he said. "Fix it, flip it. The tax credit's good for you." It sounded like an adventure. St. Augustine bills itself as the oldest city in the U.S., and I romanticized the idea of restoring a piece of that history. The house at 37 St. George was 3 stories of coquina stone with wrought iron balconies and hurricane shutters. The plaque by the front steps read, "The Old Magnolia House, Est, 1889. Locals told me it had been everything from a dignified family home to a doctor's office to a boarding house for railway workers. No one had lived there since 1993, when Hurricane Andrew's outer bands flooded the ground floor. I moved into the only livable room, an upstairs bedroom that didn't smell like mold, and spent my days ripping up mildewed carpet and prying off water-stained drywall. The more layers I peeled back, the more stories revealed themselves. Behind one section of wallpaper, I found a faded advertisement for Coca-Cola painted directly on the plaster, likely from the 1920s. In a crawl space, I found a medicine bottle labeled Patent Tonic, Dr. Finley's Miracle Cure, 1910. Each discovery made me feel like an archaeologist. 3 weeks in, I decided to tackle the wall between the parlor and what had been a doctor's examination room. The plaster crumbled easily, revealing horizontal wooden lath. As I knocked the lath away, my hammer clanged against metal. I widened the hole with a crowbar. Behind the lath, hidden within the 6 inches of wall cavity, was a small iron strongbox the size of a shoebox. It was rusted but intact. My heart beat faster. Treasure, old bands, perhaps deeds or war bonds. I carried it into the kitchen, set it on the counter, and stared at it. The lock had long since corroded. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were 2 items: a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon and a small burlap sack, heavy with something solid. The letters were brittle, written in spidery cursive on yellowed paper. The first was dated June 14th, 1930. It began, "My dearest Samuel, by the time you read this, know that I tried to save her. Dr. F. says she succumbed to fever, but I swear she was healthy yesterday. He says we must remove her to prevent contagion. He has walled her up. God forgive him. I cannot live with what I have witnessed. Forgive me." The signature was smudged. My hands trembled as I read. The letters continued, recounting fever outbreaks and the doctor's belief that quarantining the sick inside the walls would stop the spread. The final letter was a confession. "I hear her scratching and crying at night. He says it is the rats, but I know her voice. I pray God forgives us." My stomach lurched. I untied the burlap sack. Inside were 6 small bones, phalanges, fingers. They were tiny, like a child's. I dropped the bag and staggered back. In that moment, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. My skin prickled. A faint, sweet smell filled the air, orange blossoms, like those on the trees outside in spring. And then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic scratching coming from the very wall I'd opened. It started slow, then grew louder. Scrape, pause, scrape. It sounded like fingernails on plaster. I froze. "Hello?" I whispered, ridiculous as it felt. The scratching stopped. A whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it, seeped out from the wall. Cold. It was the voice of a child. I stepped closer, heart racing. "What's your name?" I asked, voice shaking. No answer, just breathing, soft and shallow, as if someone were pressed up to the other side. I couldn't move. Tears welled in my eyes. The weight of the letters, the bones, the admission of someone bricked up alive over a century ago settled on my chest like a stone. The rational part of my brain snapped back. I grabbed my phone and called the St. Johns County Sheriff. An officer arrived, listened to my story, and looked skeptical until I showed him the bones. He called forensics. They taped off the room. Over the next few hours, more deputies arrived, along with a historian from Flagler College. They pulled down more of the wall. Behind the cavity was a narrow space, maybe 2 feet wide, sealed at the top. Inside lay the skeleton of a child, curled into a fetal position. Her dress had long since decayed, but the outline of a ribbon remained around her skull. The historian speculated she was around 6 years old, buried with her favorite doll, which lay beside her. During the 1913 yellow fever outbreak, quarantine laws were extreme, she said quietly. Doctors would do whatever they thought necessary. This is beyond cruels. The bones were sent to the medical examiner. The local paper ran a piece. Child's remains found in historic home. There was outrage, fascination. Then the news cycle moved on. I moved out. I couldn't sleep there anymore. The orange blossom scent lingered no matter how many windows I opened. At night, if I closed my eyes, I saw tiny fingers reaching through lath slats. I tried to rationalize that the whisper and scratching were products of my imagination, triggered by reading those letters, but sometimes, in my new apartment miles away, I wake at 3 a.m. and hear faint scraping in the wall behind my bed. I tell myself it's the pipes. Still, I keep the lights on and whisper, "I'm sorry. You're not forgotten." Last month, I walked past the Magnolia House. A for sale sign swung in the breeze. A contractor stood on the porch, clipboard in hand. I thought about stopping to warn him, but who would believe me? The only proof I kept was one letter, tucked into a frame in my living room. It's a reminder that walls hold more than studs and plaster. They hold secrets, and sometimes those secrets want to be heard. If you ever restore an old building, listen to the quiet. You might not be alone. If you spend enough time on America's backroads, you start to understand why maps aren't the whole story. GPS will tell you the fastest route, but it doesn't warn you about the parts of asphalt that hold memories like dried bloodstains. Before I settled down, I spent 6 years crisscrossing the country as a medical courier. I'd drive all night with coolers of donor organs in the back. The fate of a patient in Dallas or Denver riding with me. The job paid well because of the hours and because I didn't ask questions. It was also lonely, to stay awake. I'd tune the radio to static and talk to myself. Sometimes the road talked back. The first road that got under my skin was an abandoned section of Route 66 near Amboy, California. In July 2013, I was ahead of schedule and decided to take the scenic route instead of the I-40. I wanted to see the ghost towns the interstate had killed. It was 2 a.m. when I rolled through the ruins of Roy's Motel and Cafe, its neon sign dark. The temperature outside was still over 90 degrees, the Mojave Desert holding on to the day's heat. I slowed to 35 mph and let the warm wind blow through the core. That's when I heard it, a voice crackling through the radio over the static. "Turn back." 3 syllables, whispered. I glanced at the radio. My preset was a country station out of Barstow that should have been all twang and commercial jingles. Instead, there was silence. "Hello?" I said, Half kidding. The voice, still faint, repeated, "Turn back." I laughed nervously, chalked it up to a CB transmission bouncing weirdly. 5 miles later, my headlights washed over something on the road. A white sedan sat at a crooked angle. Hazard lights off. I slowed. As my beams swept the driver's side, I saw the windshield was shattered inward, like from a head-on collision. The car was empty. No blood, no driver, no footprints in the dust. I gunned the engine and didn't look back. The next morning, I mentioned it at a diner in Needles. The waitress refilled my coffee and said, "That stretch scares off tourists. Folks say the road takes what it wants. At least you listened." The second story wasn't mine originally. It was told to me by a man named Troy at a truck stop in Laramie, Wyoming, in December 2015. We were both thawing our hands over terrible coffee. He said he used to run cattle feed from Cheyenne to small ranches along U.S. Route 287. One night in March 2002, snow was blowing sideways, and the road was empty. Around 3 a.m., he saw tail lights ahead. Grateful for company, he kept pace. Then his CB radio crackled. A child's voice came through. "Daddy, I'm cold." Troy said his chest seized. He had lost his daughter to SIDS in 1989. He hadn't spoken about her in years. "Daddy, I'm cold," the voice repeated. He pulled over, shaking. The tail lights ahead didn't slow. Troy turned off the radio. The next morning, he stopped at a diner in Rawlins and told the cook what happened. The cook paled and said, "That stretch of 287 used to be Highway 789 in 1904. A family of 4 froze to death when their car broke down in a blizzard and no one found them for 3 days. They kept calling CB radios for help, but the storm messed with the signal. People heard them, but they were miles away. Troy quit long-haul driving that spring. The third road dug its claws into me personally. It's a narrow 2-lane called County Road Sipor, cutting through dense pine forest in the Ouachita Mountains of Arkansas. In August 2017, I was routed from Little Rock to Fort Smith with a cooler full of kidneys. The GPS said CR-74 would shave 20 minutes off my time. Locals call it the Old Military Road. Halfway through, the pavement gives way to gravel. No streetlights, no other car, just my headlights tunneling through the trees. About 11 p.m., my left headlight flickered and went out. My right beam seemed to tunnel deeper into the woods than it should have. I eased off the gas. That's when a figure stepped onto the shoulder ahead. A woman in a long dress, hands clasped. Her hair was matted, hanging over her face. I slammed on the brakes. She didn't flinch. I laid on the horn. She raised her head slowly. Her eyes caught the light. 2 points of reflection like a deer's, but higher, human height. Her mouth opened as if to scream, but no sound came. My right headlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed her. I fumbled with the high beams. Both lights came back on. The road ahead was empty. Heart pounding, I punched the gas and didn't stop until I hit a Walmart parking lot in Fort Smith. The next day, a mechanic told me the headlight wiring was fine. "You didn't drive 74 at night, did you?" he asked. People see things there. My uncle swears a woman in white flagged him down in 1982, then vanished. Folks say she's looking for her husband, a soldier who died on that road in 1943 in a convoy accident. People ask me why I stopped courier work. I tell them I got tired of the miles. The truth is, the road started feeling like more than pavement. Once you hear voices on an abandoned highway, or think a ghost is using the CB to reach out, it's hard to enjoy the solitude. And maybe the most disturbing part isn't the woman in white or the whisper on the radio. It's how many accidents and tragedies are forgotten as soon as the asphalt dries. The maps change, the GPS updates, and we drive on unaware that the road we're on once held a family's last breath, last fall. I was tempted to take a shortcut on a county road outside of Marfa, Texas. I pulled up to the turnoff, then remembered the hiss of the CB, the cold voice saying, "Turn back." I stayed on the main highway. I made it home with time to spare, but sometimes when I'm driving late and the road is empty, I turn off the radio and listen. The forgotten roads are still out there. They don't care if you believe in ghosts. They just keep pulling at the edges of your mind, whispering, asking you to take a detour. Growing up on Long Island, the phrase Amityville horror was background noise, something you rolled your eyes at when the third remake came out. My parents referred to 112 Ocean Avenue the way one might reference a car crash on the Southern State Parkway. Tragic, cautionary, but distant. It wasn't until the summer of 1999, when I was 16 and stupid, that I learned why the locals lowered their voices when they talked about that house, and it wasn't because of Hollywood. Let me back up. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his parents and 4 siblings in that Dutch Colonial. He claimed voices in the house made him do it. The following December, George and Kathy Lutz bought the place at a discount. They moved in with Kathy's 3 children and left 28 days later, claiming swarms of flies, beds levitating, and a demonic pig with glowing eyes. They sold their story, and by 1979 it was a book and a film. Skeptics pointed out inconsistencies. Lawsuits followed. The house became a sideshow. The address was changed from 112 to 108 Ocean Avenue to deter thrill seekers. By 1999, a new family lived there and kept to themselves. I knew all this when my friend Kevin dared us to sneak onto the property. We were 3 bored teenagers with bikes and beer, home from college for the summer. The plan was to hop the fence around midnight, take a photo in front of the iconic quarter-moon windows, and brag to girls about it later. Kevin's older cousin worked for a locksmith and had a set of generic bump keys. It was impulsive, reckless, and, in our minds, harmless. The residents would be asleep. We'd be in and out in 5 minutes. We met behind the 7-Eleven on Merrick Road at 11:45 p.m., stashed our bikes in the woods, and walked the few blocks to Ocean Avenue. The moon hung low, casting long shadows over manicured lawns. The former 112 sat further back from the street than its neighbors, painted a tasteful blue-gray, shutters closed. A no trespassing sign was nailed to the fence. We slipped over it and crouched among the hydrangeas. My heart hammered in my throat. Kevin grinned and whispered, "Easy." He pulled out the bump key, slid it into the back door's lock, and tapped. It turned. We exchanged wide-eyed looks. He eased the door open. The air that greeted us was cool, stale, the faint scent of old wood and something sweet, maybe perfume, hung in the dark. We stepped inside, our cheap flashlights casting thin beams. The kitchen looked like any middle-class kitchen in 1999. Laminate counters, white appliances, no green slime, no swarms of flies. A chair sat pushed under the table. We tiptoed into the hallway. To our left was the staircase. I swallowed hard, thinking about how the DeFeo children had slept upstairs in 1974, unaware of their brother loading a rifle. My flashlight flickered and steadied. Kevin whispered, "Come on, take the picture." We crept into the living room. The quarter-moon windows loomed overhead, framed by heavy drapes. Kevin raised his camera. His flash filled the room with white light. In that second, I saw it. A woman stood in the doorway to the dining room, 10 feet from us. She wore a nightgown. Her hair was long and dark. Her eyes were fixed on me. Her expression was sorrowful. The flash died. Darkness reclaimed the room. Kevin hissed, "Run!" We sprinted back through the kitchen, out the door, over the fence. We didn't stop until we hit the 7-Eleven parking lot, lungs burning. Kevin dropped to his knees, laughing breathlessly. "Holy, did you see that? We got it!" He held up the camera. His hands shook. We pedaled home and promised never to tell. It wasn't until the next afternoon that I saw the photo. Kevin developed it at a 1-hour photo lab. It showed me and Kevin grinning nervously in front of the quarter-moon windows. Behind us, faint but undeniable, was the outline of a woman in a nightgown. Her face was blurry, as if she'd moved during the exposure. Her eyes were dark sockets. My stomach dropped. We hadn't told anyone we were going. The house's new owners weren't home that night. So who was she? We swore to burn the photo. Kevin stuffed it in his pocket and headed home. 2 days later, he called me, voice shaking. "The picture's gone. It wasn't in my pocket when I threw my pants in the laundry. My mom found the negative on the floor. It's blank." We laughed it off nervously and moved on. I kept expecting to see something in the news. Teenagers arrested for trespassing. Nothing. Years later, working as a journalist, I interviewed a former Suffolk County detective who'd been on the DeFeo case. Off the record, he told me the upstairs bedrooms had been oddly cold the morning they found the bodies, like the windows had been open all night. They hadn't. He also said neighbors reported seeing a woman in a nightgown wandering the property in the weeks after the murders. They assumed she was Kathy Lutz until she said she'd been too scared to step outside after dark. Here's what they don't put in the movies. Not everything about the Amityville house fits the narrative. There were weird things reported long before the Lutzes moved in and long after they left. There's a reason the current owners politely decline interview requests. There's also a reason the police respond quickly to trespassers, not because of ghosts, but because people live there and deserve peace. I don't know what I saw that night. Maybe a trick of the flash and my imagination. Maybe the imprint of someone who died in that house and never left. What I do know is this. Sometimes the stories we dismiss as hoaxes still have a kernel of truth. And sometimes when you break into a place with a history of violence, you bring back more than bragging rights.